this will be a good one to start us out with.
Okay.
Aliens. What are your thoughts?
So did you see the Bashar clip about
There's so many Bashar videos out there.
but about the election?
Yes. The one that's like,
Yeah.
if we as humanity or the United States choose the female, we will encounter first contact. If we choose
Yeah.
the male, aka Trump,
Yeah.
World War III will break out. And it was like, what?
Yeah, no, that was intense. Like he's yeah, and it was in the reverse order of what you just said. He was like,
this is what we are allowed to say. The female will lead to open contact. The male will lead to the termination of the United States and World War III. End of comment.
and he goes on, and then he stops and he's like, if you choose the female, you will have first contact. And I was like, damn, we're gonna meet some aliens.
You said it so ambiguously too, so it's like leaves room for like if Trump gets sick and dies, or gets assassinated, or gets thrown in jail, like um, then you know it doesn't have to be Trump necessarily.
I mean, I think that there will be conflict no matter who gets elected. If Trump gets elected, there will be conflict. If Kamala gets elected, there will also be conflict. I can see either way going towards conflict. You know, Bashar probably doesn't want Trump, or the guy who is Bashar. What's that guy's name? Daryl. Daryl probably doesn't
Inkman
want
or something
Trump.
like that. Yeah, yeah.
But who knows? Anyway, I was more excited about like aliens because the
Aliens.
government has been teasing aliens for a while now.
Yeah, like a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know. There's also a thing I saw about. Did you see the thing about the plasma bubble in space over the pyramids?
Yeah, I've heard some things about that. The plasmoids.
So anyways, recently they came across plasma bubbles hanging around over top of the pyramids of Giza. Kind of like so. So they did a deep dive case study on plasma. When I say they, I'm talking about them. And I'm gonna break it down for you and tell you what they found. First off, can we note by saying that they are referring to them as plasmoids? Why would they refer to them as plasmoid? When I started reading it, I was like, thinking the same thing. Why are we calling them plasmoids? They're calling them plasmoids because they're saying that they have intelligence and that they're conscious, intelligent, conscious beings. Plasma.
They're saying that there was a paper from some people from Harvard. Now, that doesn't mean that they're sponsored by Harvard. It doesn't mean that they are officially peer-reviewed doctors or this paper was peer-reviewed. The paper was from some people from Harvard who said that there could be, and they seem to have evidence that there are plasmoids, basically, there's liquid, gas, solid, and then plasma. It's its own kind of form of whatever. But you can have, life forms that exhibit all these different entities, and fire isn't necessarily life, but there seems to be something intentional, at least lifelike in plasma in different places, especially out in space. But it seems to be attracted to human activity. Yeah, I thought that was super cool.
Aliens, aliens, aliens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And just I think based on, the bell curve of humanity, we talked about this last time. I think there's gonna be majority of them are just like, I'm an alien. What you gonna do about it? I mean, maybe not with the accent, but like 5% are gonna be like, I am a supremely loving and benevolent being. How can I help you? And then the other, on the other extreme, we're gonna be like, I'm an asshole. How can I ruin your day? So yeah, I'm sure there's I mean, if humans are any indication of the niceness or not niceness of life out in the universe, it's an evolutionary advantage to some degree to be a jerk. You get things personally and individually if you're a jerk. By stealing, by force, yes, you get what you want, more so than the communal good. And that is an evolutionary advantage. If you rape, your seed and your offspring are going to continue on more so than the average Joe. Oh, sorry, Joe. Don't mean to use your name in vain.
Oh man, I'm very used to it. But
Yeah.
no, I mean you probably heard that the game theory thing about the prisoner's dilemma. You know the prisoner's dilemma?
Refresh my memory.
Oh man, you're gonna make me explain it. I'll try my best.
Hey,
So
I'll send you here. Here, you can see
yeah.
it.
In the prisoner's dilemma, prisoners are separated into separate rooms. They each have two options. They can either snitch or they can remain silent. If they both remain silent, they only get 1 year in prison. However, if prisoner B snitches but prisoner A does not, prisoner B gets 0 years and prisoner A gets 20 years. So prisoner B is individually incentivized to snitch because in this scenario, they both get 1 year, but in this scenario, if they snitch, they get none. And because they're both individually incentivized to snitch, this is what usually ends up happening, where both of them will snitch and they both get 5 years, which is strictly worse than if they had both remained silent.
There it is.
Well, I'll do my best. Yeah. So it's basically like they were trying to figure out using game theory if there's like a basis for ethics or like what's the best way to be if you want to be successful in life. And the prisoner's dilemma is, it's like the classic thing where there's two criminals or suspected criminals, I guess, that got arrested and they're being questioned. And the law enforcement agency says if you tell on your friend, then you won't get any prison sentence as long as he doesn't tell on you too, right? If they tell on each other, they both get a prison sentence, but it's a lesser prison sentence than if one of them snitches on one of them, but the other one doesn't snitch, right? And if neither of them snitch, then then they both get like a lesser sentence too. Again, if you snitch and the other person doesn't snitch on you, then you might get 0 and he might get a lot. And if you both snitch on each other, you get a lot, but it's like less than if one person gets the whole brunt of the guilt, right? So there's a
Incentive?
kind of an incentive, yeah, to snitch, right? But there's also, if you are like being like, not a snitch, living by your code or whatever, then there's kind of an incentive is so long as both of you are following the same code, right? So what they did, these scientists, they developed computer algorithms to play that, and they designed them to play the prisoner's dilemma game. Basically, they had them run different scenarios, different simulations, where they would play the same game over and over again to see statistically which one would win, which one wouldn't win. Now, they call it cooperating where you don't snitch, right? Competing where you do snitch, right? And what they found is in a zero-sum game environment, never cooperating, always cheating or whatever, tends to win out in the long run. It's not even that long of a long run, right? If you always cheat versus if you always compete, right? But in a non-zero sum game, which is like life, more like actual life, that it doesn't work that way. Always snitching or always competing doesn't actually have a positive outcome for the people who are always cheating, right? Which is true because it's like people who are like, always cheating, always competing, never like taking anybody else's, welfare into account tend to go to prison. They tend to, not always, right? Some of them end up being
Right.
politicians, but but yeah, but then they figured out that the best strategy is actually like what they call tit for tat. So it's like if you start playing and you start with cooperate, right? And then you see what the other guys is going to do, right? If he doesn't cooperate, then you do it back. You don't cooperate back. So you kind of give what you get, sort of thing. And that actually worked better than either always competing or always cooperating, right? And then they had uh, they induced variability into the game, right? So sometimes the algorithm would make mistakes, right? So somebody might make a mistake in the game, like one of the algorithms might make a mistake. Say it was a always cooperate, it would accidentally compete one time or whatever. So in that situation, they had the tit for tat plus a forgiveness algorithm where it would forgive like one time or something like that, right? And so that algorithm actually won. Like in the situation where there was variability, that algorithm actually performed better than any of the other algorithms. So yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that there is like some ethical basis for the idea of forgiveness. Because like, if you're harshing out on everybody who ever does you anything wrong, you might just push everybody away because everybody makes mistakes. Like life isn't a zero-sum game and people aren't like robots, right? They make mistakes a lot of the time. So
Hmm.
yeah. How did we get on that topic?
We were talking about aliens and
Oh yeah,
um
if aliens are like people in that way. That's
oh
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Huh.
if aliens have, the people who are like, always cheat, and if they have people who are like always cooperate, and then they have people who are kind of in the middle, like you're
Yeah,
saying, like
right.
tit for tat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a couple different things here. I have always been thinking about like, what if there were aliens? How does that fit into our theology? Because when I was a Christian, like I wanted to plug in this algorithm into everyday life. Does this make sense based on everyday life? So
Uh-huh.
when we were going through psychology class,
Uh-huh.
one of the things he said was, when you start out as a society or culture, you go from like, Stone Age to like the computer age. And if you're kind of like going up the ladder of like success, you go from like using hardly any carbon footprint to like really, really, really bad. But then it like, as you become more advanced, it's like really a lot less
Uh-huh.
um because you have the technology to overcome your whatever, but when you're like progressing in the middle, it's pretty bad. um so along those same lines, he said something like, also, when you are advancing as a species, no, he doesn't say species, he said as a country, as an organization,
Uh-huh.
um in order to achieve a level of greatness, like there's a certain threshold for like you're either gonna like peter out and go nothing or like really succeed. It takes a lot of cooperation. For instance, like you can't just build an atomic bomb um like in your basement. You have to like cooperate. I mean, for the most part, it takes a
You
lot of
can build
cooperation.
yeah, you can
Oh,
build a nuclear
okay,
reactor in the
Joe.
basement of school though.
All right,
Have
thanks,
you heard
Joe.
about
But
that?
he
No, have you heard about that though? That they built a nuclear reactor in the basement of like Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Have you heard about
no,
that?
no.
It's true. Just a side note. Anyway, continue. I'm all ears.
Okay, I'll have to
Just
look at, here's the link for that article. So he basically said it takes a level of like
yeah,
cooperation that
yeah.
without it you will not achieve greatness. And I said, uh, that means aliens are nice. And unfortunately, I blurted out something like that in class, and he just looked at me like, geez, you're the biggest idiot in this whole class, is looking at you like, Like, what are you doing? And this was in front of like 120 other kids in the psychology class. I'm like, no, 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 like it makes sense to me because like if you want to reach the stars, if you want to go to another planet, if you want to just like achieve greatness in the Milky Way, even like you have to cooperate to get somewhere. He's like, no, 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 I don't know, man. Because if you think about it, like back in medieval days, you know, they built trebuchets and like um armor and stuff like that, and they were over to wipe out their enemies with a certain level of like, you know, communal like cooperation, and it led to a civilization's destruction. This is a bunch of like that idea does not float. But I'm just like, I was just like, wow, he's like shaming me in front of everybody. So I'm not like literal shame, but I just felt like he wanted to end the discussion and it wasn't up for debate. But like I honestly
Where was
thought at
that?
that
Where was that again?
uh and then you in the psychology department,
Oh,
um
okay.
it starts with a P. He had long hair, he had a ponytail,
Okay.
long hair.
Oh
He
yeah,
retired
yeah, I
five,
remember
six
that
years
guy.
ago.
Yeah.
Um anyway, he
Was
was
he?
a nice guy. I liked him.
Yeah.
He anyway, so I just felt like it made complete sense to me to be like it takes cooperation and niceness, like genuinely goodness to like reach the stars. Like,
Hmm.
you know, the Star Trek idea. Um, but he shut me down.
I agree with you, by the way.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that aliens are like on the same bell curve as people. I mean, I'm sure they're on a bell curve, but I imagine it's like a different bell curve, right? Um, Part of it is just because so many people who have near-death experiences talk about aliens when they come back, and they're
Or at
like,
least entities, yeah.
yeah, and but especially like aliens literally who live in different parts of the galaxy. And they talk about how like some aliens are unknown benefactors, um in how like these species are kind of like looking out for us, so to speak. And some aliens are kind of like they kind of see us as being like animals kind of, and they're kind of interested but not super friendly. Um, and he said those are the ones that you see because their technology isn't good enough to hide their ships as well as the ones that have the really good technology. You don't see those ones because they're like their cloaking or technology is so good that you can't even spot them. So anyway, just a side note that kind of going with what you're saying.
Mm,
It's kind of like if aliens are real,
yeah.
I agree. Like it takes a certain level of um, cooperation to get to that level of technology.
Right.
So,
My personal example like kind of shoots myself in the foot. I said you can't build a nuclear bomb in your basement. And I was like, well, bombs are a destructive force. So, you know, it's not like a wonderful thing. But yeah, like the more bombs that you make for destruction of your own species, I mean, human against human conflict, you're not going to reach the stars if you all successfully make and deploy atomic bombs. We'll all be dead,
mm,
you know? So in some ways it does. I mean, there's a certain uncanny valley, you know what I mean? Like
right.
cooperation is good and then it gets horrible. Like, but if you overcome your jerkness, you can achieve great things. You know, like nuclear energy or nuclear bombs are both helpful. Another thing that is mildly related deals with what we normally talk about: Christianity, the Bible, that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
So I looked it up once. I was very curious. I said, okay, the Bible said that the original sin of Adam affected all of creation. And so I was
Hmm.
like, huh, all of creation. That would be the entire universe. But let's
Hmm.
just assume that this part of science and theology work hand in hand, and the event horizon of the original sin that ruined all of creation spread out from that point in the Garden of Eden at the speed of light, okay, how much of the universe was affected? So I did the math, and at the speed of light, from about 6,000 years ago, would only reach about a third of the Milky Way. So, like, it hasn't even left our galaxy yet. Like, it hasn't affected the entirety of our galaxy yet. It is literally like if this is the galaxy, it's like it's affected like this much at the speed of light from
Yeah.
6,000 years ago. And so then I was like, okay. And apparently, according to the gospel, Jesus' action on the cross and his death and resurrection fixed it. So that like fixes the so there's like an explosion of bad and then like the same
Version of
healing
good.
like following. So there's like this donut ring of like badness and then goodness, like that just ripples out. I'm like, uh, just based on that alone, it kind of makes me think like this whole idea of original sin is just kind of silly. Just that, like, because like people use the idea of original sin and the whole like the fall as like you can't trust that evolution is true uh because mosquitoes don't seem to have a purpose other than like harming people, but that wasn't God's design. That's caused by the sin and the fall and what happened after Adam ate the fruit in the garden. I'm like,
Yeah.
i don't I don't know, man. I think that you can trust that like whatever is not like a corruption from an event defeating an out. That just doesn't make sense. But yeah, now I agree wholeheartedly. Like that is not what happened. There's a guy on TikTok who wrote a book. Um, his book's title is "Original Sin is a Lie," and it just goes over point by point how this idea from Augustine just was an outlier that became the dominant theology, but it wasn't a thing for until he came around. But now
Mm.
it's kind of overtaken things. But now we see the negative repercussions of this theology that don't really make sense, and that resonates with me so much more than this whole idea of like a chaos bubble that doesn't really matter now expanding throughout our cosmos, because that's
Yeah.
kind of silly.
Yeah. I mean, I bet Dan McClellan would say that the only way that you would think that original sin was supported by the Bible is if you had already been exposed to the idea of original sin, and then you kind of plugged that idea back into the scripture and found it. Because I was listening to the thing where he was talking about how that's true with the Trinity too. But I think that there's more evidence for the Trinity than there is for original sin in the Bible. I think the Trinity, you can kind of squint, it does kind of make sense based on what the Bible says. Original sin, like that's so bogus. Like, especially if you like use your imagination at all. Like, I I'm not saying I don't think the creation story like points to anything or points to nothing, because I think it does. It points to something. Like, um, but I don't think it points to this idea that people were perfect before and then all of a sudden like they were imperfect because they sinned, right? I think it's more that they were hunter gatherers before, and then like they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they knew the difference. So they knew the difference between good and evil, right? Well, that's one of the primary like technologies or whatever that is a precursor to civilization. Like, you have to have a sense of right and wrong in order to live together in a community, because like a shared set of rules, you have a king, you have a governance, you have laws that protect people's property, so they're not just all communal, um, or just eating whatever they can get
Yeah.
off the land. Yeah, and it organizes people into like, you have farmers here, you have, soldiers here, you have kings here. And I mean, I think my take on it is like whoever wrote that section of the Bible really was not a big fan of civilization. I mean, I think that they were dealing with the effects of empire and the evils of, like, Rome and the Assyrians and the Babylonians. They were thinking about all those things and how those had affected their people throughout history. And they were like, well, this sucks. Maybe we should try to, wouldn't it be nice if we could put Pandora back in the box?
I had
And
heard
yeah,
I had heard of a specific author who used the event of agrarianism or farm life as the thing that is like the sin of or the fall, as the story to plug in for for all that, like when humans started farming and doing stuff. That is what the creation story is pointing to, as
yeah,
like the thing. And I have heard that, and that's kind of a really a genius sort of explanation. There is some evidence to it, like when humans encounter a virgin space, we do tend to kind of like initially cause some destruction. Like it looks like the mammoths and the giant sloths and the um, mega bears that used to live in America were eaten by when people first started coming here, or at least a certain type of people. Because there's mixed evidence of that there was people far before the extinction event. Um, and then a certain other type of people came around that time when they did become extinct. So whatever. But what I think the creation story points to is best described in one of Rob Bell's video series from his video series Numa. Have you ever watched Numa videos? It was big in the like evangelical Christian media sort of a thing, like
probably,
late
probably.
2000s area. He made some really fantastic like media slick kind of things, but he was also a little bit liberal. And he said that the creation stories of the neighboring areas were all about how humans were serving as slaves to their gods, and how the Israelite stories were the flipped version of that, where like we don't need to serve the gods. God loves and supports his people. And so it's like a flipping sort of a thing. And so it was a contrast to the neighboring stories of divinity and humanity, because it seemed like the stories written by those in power, like Assyria or whatever like that, seemed to say, oh, you all were meant to serve the hoo-haws in charge. And it was like you know, oh, well, what if we rewrote how humanity come to be, where, yeah, you're supposed to rest a full day out of the week and not serve either God or yourself, but to be served by and supported by the divine. And I like that idea, but I'm open to other ideas, like you said, that the idea of agrarianism and civilization was its own sort of Pandora's box of problems and stuff like that. I mean, either way, it's kind of cool to visualize. Um,
Yeah. I mean, how do you get to building a nuke? Like you said, you can't just build it in your basement. Well, how can you even have a basement unless you have civilization where they figure out how to pour concrete and build basement? I mean, you wouldn't have that without that technology. So I think, like, especially back then, if you're on the bottom of the social hierarchy as a people feeling oppressed, like, yeah, of course, civilization doesn't seem that great. It seems like, wouldn't it be nice if we were all just like picking berries and eating fish and stuff, just kind of, wandering around outside? So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. And it's telling that what the curse is that's placed on Adam is that cursed is the ground because of you, and they get sent out of the garden, right, where they're eating the fruit, and they can't just pick whatever fruit they want anymore. They have to earn it by the sweat of his brow, right? Like this idea that that like now you got to work. You can't just chill. You got to work. So that's why I think that story is pointing to that. There's even a silly movie that talks about that. It's called like 0 AD or 1 AD or something like that. It's got Michael Cera and Jack Black. They talk about that. It's like a parody of the Bible, and it starts out with they're hunter gatherers, and then they find civilization. It's like talking about the idea. I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, okay, I guess I'm not the only person who's had this idea before.
That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
It's got sort of a knowledge-y taste.
Yeah, does it have a sort of forbidden taste? Because that's what it is.
You're cursed, man.
You better get out of here.
I'm going. I'm gonna start a new tribe. It's gonna be 10 times better. It's gonna be called Muscle Tribe of Danger and Excellence. So who's with me?
Oh, a shooting star. That's the best.
We're good.
Fine. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, so I personally am looking forward to aliens because I think they're probably better off than what we got here. But
Yeah.
question: if you had to choose between staying on Earth and chilling with your family and
On Earth.
doing life as normal but with aliens,
Yeah.
or exploring the cosmos but you had to leave your family all behind.
Staying on Earth. I hate space, man. I don't want to go to space. I'll hang out with the aliens, you know. If they have really good like, you know, fake gravity on their ships where it doesn't feel like I'm flying through space and like weightless and stuff, I might go for a ride.
Oh.
Man, no, not a chance. You know,
Oh.
otherwise, I'm staying right here.
Okay.
What
You don't
about
wanna
you?
have any but yeah, I would not want to leave my family either. If my family somehow died in some unnatural way that I had nothing else to like live for here, I'd be like, sure, let's go somewhere else. But like, I wouldn't want to be like, bye, family, I'll never see you again.
No, yeah.
I had heard rumors that like you could join the Space Force, which had a program a little bit like Star Trek, but you had to like loose all ties with your previous life. I have no
Okay.
idea where I had heard that, but other than the random musings of some, you know, TikTok or YouTube video. But that just made me come up with this would you rather questionnaire.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I mean it's a no-brainer to me because I don't even like flying. I don't even like being in an airplane. Like, ugh, get me out of there. So space, no, not a chance. I felt sick in like when I was 8 years old and we went and watched IMAX about like space travel. Like made me want to barf. I was like closing my eyes the whole time because anytime we were in the spaceship, like in space, I was just like, oh. I
yeah.
wasn't even moving. I was sitting in a chair. But
Well, IMAX in general can make people really sick because it's like that whole like visual dizziness. It doesn't
Yeah.
affect your inner ear, but just like the difference between what you're seeing and what you're feeling can make people sick.
Yeah.
You think we've
It's
exhausted this topic, or you want to keep going on it?
No, sure. We can move along.
So my next question, I think is my last one, is what do you agree that men are better at than women, and what are women better at than men, and how do you reconcile these stereotypes? I don't know where or how I came up with this question, but I wrote it down as something we could talk about.
I don't know, man. That's
Hot button issue you want to stay away from?
well, no. It's an interesting thing to talk about, and I wouldn't shy away from it, but I don't really have like a
Uh,
real defined like I don't know. Like I've met women that are more masculine than me, for sure. And I've met men that are, you know, as feminine, while still claiming he, him, right? While still claiming they're a man and they're more feminine than a lot of women that I've met. So like I had to write a paper actually in college
Really?
about this topic. Should men and women be treated in the same way at all times? And I wrote that I think it's very, very liberal, very, very liberal view. And I don't mean like leftist, I mean like liberal view back then, that anybody should be allowed to do whatever they want to do and are best at. So if a woman is really good at leading, being president or whatever, yeah, more power to them. In general, as a society, not only should it just be like optional to be however you want to be, right? But also like society should, I mean, if I remember right, society should make efforts to encourage people to be able to do what they are most inclined towards. In other words, are women worse at engineering and science, or are they just not encouraged to get into it? You know, if I had to take a guess, I would say it's the latter, right? Like some of the smartest girls in my middle school, one of them went on to become like a NASA engineer. But she didn't go that far with it because she ended up, I think, being a mom, and it's like it's hard to be an engineer and a mom at this, like a NASA engineer and a mom at the same time, right? And to do both really well would be tough, right? So like, are women worse at engineering and science, or is it just hard to have a career and be good and be there for your kids, right? So those sorts of so those sorts of things like that it should be allowed, but also not only allowed, but like encouraged for women to be able to work in the same places that have traditionally been male dominated spaces. That said, though, like there's certain things it does appear that there are, women are better at, or at least arguably really good at. For example, I think the record for the fastest through hike Appalachian hike time through the Appalachian Trail is by a woman, actually. She
Yeah, I
just
just
did the
saw
whole
that.
thing. Yeah, it's crazy. So like that's pretty cool. Women have done things that men would never dream of, and men have done things that women would never dream of. So it's like, I don't know, is it nature, is it nurture, is it society, is it I mean, there's obviously physical differences between men and women.
Right.
But on the other hand, I would never fight Ronda Rousey. Would you? I don't know. I don't know very many men who would fight Ronda Rousey, at least if they're being totally honest with themselves, unless they're just idiots.
Right.
Um,
Somebody
so
somebody asked, "Who would you like to fight, man?" And he listed off a whole bunch of boxers, and I'm like, Helen Keller. Like,
yeah, like none of them.
I don't want to be in a fight. If I'm gonna win, I'm gonna pick the blind and deaf one. Like, I don't want to fight.
Step around them and run away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, who wants to fight? I don't know.
No, I mean like the outliers, yeah, sure. Like, the mountain. I don't think there's any women that could defeat the mountain in a fight.
I'm sorry, I don't know
Uh,
who the mountain is or what that is.
oh, what's his name? I don't know. He's from Game of Thrones. He's a
Mm.
giant guy. He's an outlier though. He's absurdly huge man. So like, if you're talking outliers, yeah, it's like Ronda Rousey would not defeat the mountain in a fight, probably. But I mean, he's also like not a UFC fighter, so who knows? That UFC fighters are crazy. Ronda Rousey is a UFC fighter, so
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
no,
know.
that's fine. I think I agree with all of those things, and I don't want to hit too many red hot button issues for some people. I have my personal opinion about Olympics and men and women stuff. You want to put in your 2 cents before I put in my 2 cents on that, or no?
I yeah, I don't know, man.
Okay, because man, there was a lot of controversy, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but I haven't heard a lot of people say this. Like, there's the Olympics, the Special Olympics, and the Paralympics. Like,
Hmm.
I think if you have a person who is born a certain way, like born a man, like specifically a man, and this like says, I feel like I'm a woman, but I want to do boxing, or whatever, something that men always as a bell curve, they're going to be better in general than the woman's bell curve just because of physiology. Of course, like you said, there's going to be overliers at the bottom of very strong women and weaker men that you wouldn't want to put in a fight together because the man would like die. Um, but for those special circumstances where it's hard to figure out, like in the fighting, like this woman always thought that she was a woman, always grew up as a woman, was great at boxing, so that's what she like went for. Like her country would have killed her if she had said, you know what, I feel like I'm a man, or I was born a man and I feel like a woman. Her country literally would have like put her in
Right.
jail or killed her or whatever. So like
It was
in that
Tunisia, right? Tunisia.
yeah, whatever it
Yeah.
was just like, oh, like this wasn't her choice. But I know a
Yeah.
lot of people that are just like, oh, don't let the trans people like play basketball with our daughters because there's men who want to. I get that. Like, I don't want a man to pretend to be a woman just so he can get all horny and weird or awkward with the ladies in the shower or whatever. I think that those are outlier things anyway, that doesn't really happen, but I think it does once in a while. Blue moon. Regardless, I think like those special and weird circumstances might be best put in like a Paralympic situation or like Special Olympics thing because I don't know, like just because I mean there's not going to be a whole lot of transgender people wanting to do boxing professionally, but for those weird cases that are, um, let that be a consideration. I don't know. There was just a whole lot of fighting, and I was like, for those of us that are concerned about trans people trying to gain advantage because society lets us, maybe we need to have our own special like trans Olympics or something like that, just to like, I don't know. I didn't hear that as an option, and I just wanted to say that out to the world. But maybe
The
maybe
trans.
I'm like, maybe I'm gonna be blacklisted for being like sexist or something here. But I just thought maybe it would be a good alternative. Maybe. I don't know. Somebody can.
Yeah. Like, what was that? There was that one male. What was he, like a male? He was in the Olympics, and
Michael.
he got like tested or something because he was too feminine or something like that. They suspected that he was actually a woman, but like his dances were just too majestic and elegant, you know?
Really? I don't remember that one.
Yeah, he moved too gracefully and beautifully. It was too womanly, and so they suspected that he was actually a trans man. I thought that was really funny. Like that made me laugh. It's like, it goes both ways, right? Like it's
I guess again,
stupid.
yeah.
It's stupid. Like, he's just a very feminine man. It's outliers. We're talking outliers, people.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know. Like, I don't know enough about the topic really to be able to speak
That's
to
fine.
it. You know what I mean? Like,
That's fine.
I,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
Like,
we have we have the caucacity to even put out this little um video blog podcast thing anyway. We are not really experts in the field of any one of these topics that we're talking about, and it's okay sometimes to shut our mouth and say we don't know enough. That's fine.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I've had thoughts like that before, but then I just don't know. Like this woman in what was her name? Imam Khalil or something. She was fierce. just look at it, like, this is a terrifying, fierce person that could kick pretty much anybody in the world's ass, you know? She actually didn't, I don't even think she won gold, but she was just very fierce. And, you know, you heard about J.K. Rowling thing, right? That she got sued for saying that she was a man. Did you hear
No,
about
I didn't
that?
hear that. No, no.
Yeah, she got sued for saying that this woman was a man, you know? And and then like some people noticed in the back of one of her videos behind her was like it looked like black mold was growing on the wall
Oh, yeah.
of her house. And like
Yeah.
I don't know. And so then there's all these skits about like J.K. Rowling, like the mold telling J.K. Rowling to be transphobic and stuff. I just thought it was the funniest. I don't know. I used to, before she kind of went by the wayside, I used to be really interested. I used to really watch a lot of ContraPoints videos. Have you ever seen ContraPoints or heard about her? Have
No,
we ever talked
no.
about ContraPoints? She's a trans YouTuber um who talks about, I mean, she talks a lot about trans issues, trans uh
Stuff.
rights, but like the kind of like what does it mean to be trans, but also just philosophy in general. She talks about, you know, economic systems like capitalism and socialism and all these different topics. And her stated goal was to kind of decrease misunderstanding, or to kind of like reach across the aisle to the alt-right, actually, which is really interesting, because it's a trans woman on YouTube talking to, like, you know, I mean, her audience is a general audience. Like anybody could watch it and find something interesting from it. But she made a lot of connections with more right wing people, just by virtue of being very charismatic, I think, really. Like I watched pretty much every ContraPoints video, and she never addressed this question really to in any depth. I never saw a video that she put out. Maybe she's put out one since I stopped watching her. I think she got kind of tired of making them. But I don't remember her ever covering this topic. So I don't have even like a shadow of an informed opinion on it, other than like I said, outliers, man. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like
Humanity is weird.
humanity's weird. Like you just I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
One
an
thing
interesting
I
topic, though. It's an interesting topic, and I think the fact that like that, you know, you're bringing it up and you're worried about getting canceled or whatever is probably part of the problems, because like it's hard to have a nuanced opinion about it, or like even have a conversation about it without, like, on one hand, like you got the alt-right people, or like J.K. Rowling, who's like, yes, yes, they should not be allowed to compete. And then on the other hand, anybody's like, you can't even bring up this topic. We can't even be talking about this. Who are you? You know, I mean, like, you know, it's really hard to like even like, yeah, like I said, have a nuanced opinion, or like an informed opinion. I don't know. It's, you know,
right.
I've always felt like a dude, and you know, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And I mean, I have on that topic, I've always been a dude. I'll get into that, but there's one thing that I saw on like LGBTQ plus like supportive website. They said, I don't get why how J.K. Rowling can be transphobic, because she had an example of trans feminine thing in her own book. And it was like, what? And I was like, yeah, this one time Harry Potter did the polyjuice potion, and like I think he turned into Hermione, or I forget how it was. It's been several years. And they each like they swapped or something like that. And they kept referring to, I believe it was Harry Potter, as a he in a she's body. And so J.K. Rowling was like, he picked up the skirt and put it on or whatever. And the trans community was like, look, 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 she doesn't have balls. Like, Harry Potter doesn't have balls or a penis. He has all the plumbing of a woman, and yet J.K. Rowling still calls him a him. And see, that's the thing that we're all fighting for. I'm like, really? That's a pretty good point. Like, I just kind of want to hear J.K. Rowling be like, I get it. Yes. Okay. Or I'm gonna burn all my own books now. I hate myself. I just thought
Well, I don't,
is a good
I don't get
point.
why she has like the sorting hat, right? Like the sorting hat. It sorts everybody into their house, right? And
Yeah.
Harry Potter puts it on, and it's like Slytherin, and he's like, I don't want to be a Slytherin. I want to be a Gryffindor, and it's like, okay, what you want matters more than what I tell you you should be. It's like,
Oh.
damn it, J.K. Rowling, like so close to the point and just miss it by a mile. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like, and just like her whole thing is like, understanding, like, you don't have to be like any one particular thing. Like, I mean, the Fantastic Beasts movies, like, what a like metaphor of like fight the man, go against fascism, and like, and then she's just like, I don't know, man. It's so weird. It's so weird. It's so weird.
Just like
Why?
humans. Humans are weird.
Yeah, the outliers. It's outliers. Well, and like, and trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs for short, they are still feminists, right? So they are not going to be supporting, anti-feminist things. But everybody's got their thing. Everybody's got their thing. The point is, everybody discriminates. I don't think there's anybody in the world who doesn't have their weird little thing where they're like, like their weird little judgment about somebody or something, or like how somebody lives. There's certain dudes that I can spot where they're like, I described them a little bit, like they just look mad, they look angry, and they have like, you know, generally like a flat brim baseball hat with like, they have like baggy jeans and like flat brim baseball cap, and like, they look like they're kind of tough, and like they just kind of walk around looking angry. It's like the Squeezy Jibs look, if you know who Squeezy Jibs is.
No. You
Squeezy
you
Jibs
are
is like a,
exposing me to so many new things, my friend.
well, everybody should know about Squeezy Jibs, so it's good. It's good. Yeah, it's like Squeezy Jibs. He's kind of like a parody guy on the internet. I mean, it's just kind of like white trash looking guys. Like I like was admitting to myself like that I have a judgment for like these kind of looking dudes. That I don't. And it's particularly white dudes that look kind of trashy, that I'm kind of like, you know what I mean? And it got me thinking. I was like, oh, I guess I have mine too. You know what I mean? Like certain kind of guys, just like, are we gonna fight? And is he gonna? Probably not though. Like a lot of those dudes are actually super nice, and they're not like gonna fight you. They're actually just like super chill, nice dudes. But it's like the association. So.
Yeah, we one time had this diversity sort of a training in seminary as well, and the teacher, a typical white professorial kind of a person, was talking, and then this guy in a really fancy looking pea coat, trench coat kind of a looking thing, like walked in with his like leather briefcase thing and sunglasses, and he was looking all cool and like really like fancy. He just kind of walks in and be like, hey, is this a good time for me to come on in? And I was like, rude. Like, what are you doing? Like thinking you're all fancy and stuff like this. Like, what's your deal, Mr. Fancy Guy? And then the teacher's like, oh, this is the guy that's gonna help us with diversity training. And he went on and said, like, you all, when I came in the room, what was your first thought? It was that I was black, wasn't it? And I was like, huh? Oh, yeah, you are. Like, I thought you were a jerk because you like interrupted the class with fancy, like rich looking clothes on. Now that you say it, yeah, you are black. But just like I realized that like I did discriminate against that guy, but it wasn't for the reason he told me I was.
Yeah, yeah. Or like, yeah, that reminds me of like I was hanging out in Portland, and I was like just like spacing off. I was like at New Seasons or something, you know, like, waiting for my food to get cooked, and I heard over like one of my shoulders, like, "You're looking a little aloof over there. Like, I'm not gonna hurt you." And I turned around, and it was a black guy, and um, I was like, "Oh, no, you know," like I was just minding my own business. Like, this is Portland. We don't smile at each other or look at each other ever. So
Like a
it's
mini
nothing
New
personal.
York.
Yeah. In New York, they actually like interact with each other. They yell at each other, but they don't. In Portland, they just ignore each other. Like, you just don't talk in Portland. Like smiling at people or making eye contact or anything like that. It's just kind of weird. Um,
I heard that's
but
what New York is like, so I
Mhm.
interrupted. Go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, like when I was in New York, you'd be walking along in Central Park and you wouldn't want to talk to people. And like people would be like selling their mixtape or whatever. And they'd like come up to you and talk to you and be like, "Hey, buy my mixtape," or whatever. And like some actually that happened to me there too. Like this rapper, black dude walked up to me and I was like kind of in a hurry. I was trying to get somewhere. And so I looked kind of scared, I guess. He's like, "I'm not going to hurt you." I was like, "I didn't think you were going to hurt me. I'm just kind of in a hurry." But yeah, they're much more in your face. Or like if you take a while to order, they're like, "What is your order?" "Mwah!" That's kind of like New York. It's like loud. But Portland is not like that. It's like everybody's very quiet. Anyway, so back to this guy. This guy, he's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to hurt you." And I was like, "Yeah, we're just being aloof Portlanders right now. Don't worry about it. It's nothing personal." And we had a conversation with him, and like he was like an engineer from Camas, which is like kind of the sticks, not too far from there. And he was nice, pretty nerdy guy. But after we left, my wife was like, "Yeah, I was glaring at him because he was eating some marinara sauce out of one of those little paper cups, and he was like squeezing it in his mouth, but it wasn't like all going in his mouth. It was like falling on the floor, and he was making a big mess. And so I was glaring at him for being a goober.
Wow, that's funny.
and that's why and that's why he thought that I was judging him because he was black. And I was like, "You know what, that sucks. Like, not being white, and like how often is that going to come up for me as a white person? But no, it sucks for him because he can't even tell the difference between we're racist, we're aloof, or he's being gross. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't even
Yeah.
like, like if you're a white person and somebody's kind of like, you're either like, "What's their problem?" or "What am I like? Are my shoelaces tied?" Or like, "Do I have a big booger out of my nose or coming out of my nose or whatever?" Like, but like enough cases where the person is, where a black person gets like grief just on account of being black, that they start to like associate
Mm.
other things with racism. That sucks,
Yeah,
man.
it
Like,
does suck. Yeah.
yeah,
It's not a problem we have to deal with.
yeah,
A few minutes ago when we were talking about diversity training, that brings up something I heard recently. Um, have you heard of the tolerance paradox?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I hadn't really until this post I saw that said, "Oh, I found a great way to solve the tolerance paradox." And I'm like putting two and two together. I'm like, I have an idea of what the tolerance paradox is just in the title. Like, if everybody's gonna tolerate everybody, then the one person who's not is the one that's gonna like take over because everybody else is tolerant. Like, is that kind of what it is? Like,
Well, like, yeah,
narcissists or
if you
whatever might take
tolerate,
over
yeah, if you tolerate the Nazis, you give them a platform, and then you kind of give them, you know,
power.
you
Yeah.
you give them more power than they would otherwise have. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
You
so
don't want
therefore you
to
don't have
involve.
a tolerant society anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
think this article, it was like a post, like a Twitter, like that small,
Okay.
basically said, my student summed it up this way, that the tolerance is a social contract. And if you, as an individual, break that contract, you are no longer in or following the communal standards, and therefore we can kick you out or we can discriminate against you. And like so if you're being intolerant, so can we about you because you've broken the contract. And somebody's like, "Oh, this is genius. This is like fulfilling that itch of trying to figure out to my philosophy students about, those law, like straw man argument and pointed question and all these other like names for social constructs, whatever they are. Um, like this helps answer that conundrum that I've been having in my class by saying it's a social contract, and if you break it, then you're no longer welcome. So I mean, I hadn't come across it until I found this person's um, post, but maybe somebody would find that useful. So I brought it up.
Yeah. I mean, liberalism is just as much of like a faction as any other faction, right? So like the idea of tolerance, yeah, it is. It's just it's liberalism, I think, is so has been so dominant, in America. Even like a lot of conservatives are pretty liberal in terms of like, I'm not talking about like leftist, but just like in terms of like, yeah, I was pretty conservative when I wrote that women should be allowed to do whatever they want, but I still thought that way because I was like liberal conservative, right? Not like conservative conservative. So, but the fact that it's so ubiquitous in the United States is probably, if I had to take a guess, I don't really know, but if I had to take a guess, it's probably the origin of the tolerance paradox, because it's like, no, we're not tolerant of everybody. Like the communists, like we fought at the height of liberalism. We went over to Vietnam and like killed gazillions of Vietnamese people just to stop the spread of communism. It's not tolerant. that's that's the opposite. So no, it's just a fact. It's a faction. So if you see it like that, it makes more sense.
Yeah. I think we can even start wrapping up unless you want to talk about something, but I was curious, what's up with carrots, my friend?
Did you watch American Vandal?
No.
Um yeah, you should watch it. Just
It's a
watch it.
show or a
Show.
movie?
Show.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to tell you anything about it before you watch it. I want you just to watch it.
Oh, but it has
I
something to
don't
do with carrots.
This is like a shirt from the show
Oh,
that
okay.
I was like, "Oh, that shirt slaps. I got to go buy it right now."
That's funny.
Yeah. Um
Huh.
I actually I actually had a question for Dan McClellan. It's kind of a two-parter question. One part of the question is, I was I was at work the other day. My boss is from Turkey. Well, no, he's not from Turkey. He's from America originally. He's a missionary kid. Um, Now he's not a kid anymore, right? But missionary kid by origin. Um, and he lived in Turkey doing international aid work for a long time, and then came back to the United States. So we were in one of our offices, and he met a woman from the Middle East. I think she was from Palestine, actually. Um, and he was talking to her in her language. I think he was speaking Turkish or maybe Arabic. I don't know if he speaks both Turkish and Arabic. Anyway, but I recognized he kept saying Philistine, or like a word that sounded a lot like Philistine in the language. And I was like, after they were done talking, I was like, Philistine. You were saying Philistine, or like a word that sounded like Philistine. What's that? And he said, "Oh, it means Palestine."
Yeah, I get it.
Right? Like he was talking about Palestine, but in that language, the word for Palestine was really similar to Philistine. And then I was like, Philistine, Palestine, Philistine, Palestine, Philistine. You know, it's just like, what the, what? Really? Like that's the origin of that word? Um,
So you just
so
want to have Dan confirm that or something?
I'm wondering, like, Dan knows a lot about like, Near East languages, or he knows a lot of people who know a lot about Near East languages, and so maybe he would know something about that. Like, does and it seems pretty obvious, but like, um, the the connection between Philistine and Palestine, and it's the same area, the same area of the Middle East. The Philistines were their homeland was on the coast, which so is Gaza. I think I'm getting my geography right. Um, so like that's interesting,
Yeah.
Are they the ancestors of the Philistines? Maybe. The Palestinians. But then another thing that I was reminded of last night, because I've been working on this theory, which maybe somebody else has had this theory, and so that's my other question for Dan: is there anybody else who shares this theory? But in the year 1177 BC, prior to that, there was this kind of very connected web of uh, countries, cultures, empires all across the Middle East. Hittites, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, etc., etc. Um, they were all connected in this web of kind of like, um, similar to today in terms of not as advanced, right? But this kind of um, connected world, globalist society, multiple societies connected together through systems of trade. And around 1177, it all fell apart. Um, so, and there's a book on it called 1177, the year that civilization collapsed. And there's theories, there's a number of different theories about what caused the collapse. Like, was it earthquakes? Was it climate change? Was it drought? Was it famine? Was it disease? But then also in the midst of it, there was this event called like the invasion of the sea peoples, people who come from the sea, and they came and they invaded a bunch of different countries. They came even as far south as Egypt, and and around this time, all of the civilizations except for Egypt completely collapsed. Have you heard that? Have you heard about this topic much, or this theory?
Yeah, only from you. You said that there was a video series on YouTube about the whole 1177 thing, and you said us should watch it, and it's like a day long or something like that. It's like really long. I'm like, I don't know, man. I can't watch all that.
Well, I'm giving you a summary of it anyway.
Hmm.
I think the one that I found was like an hour. It's by a guy named Eric Klein.
So you wanting to get his opinion on the whole 1177 thing?
So what happened is before 1177, like Egypt controlled Palestine, or Canaan, or whatever you want to call it. They controlled Canaan. It was part of Egypt, but then they actually lost Canaan as a result. They lost that area as a result of the war with the sea people and all of the disasters that happened. And interestingly, one of the names of the sea people, the tribes or the groups of the sea people, was the Peleset, that in the Egyptian accounting of the battles that they fought with them. There's a number of different groups that came over, but yeah, one of them was the Peleset, right? And Peleset, they think that that was the Philistines. It also sounds kind of like Palestine. So that's an interesting question. Is the root of Palestine the Peleset, like that group of people? Is that the root word for Palestine and the Philistines and all that stuff? That's one question. The other question is the story of Joseph in the Bible like a legendary memory of that time, right? Because he gets sold into slavery. He's living in Canaan or Israel, or that wasn't called Israel back then, but Canaan. He gets sold into slavery. He goes down to Egypt. He becomes the Pharaoh's right-hand man, basically, because he interprets the Pharaoh's dream. It's like, we're going to have 7 years of good
Famine.
times and then 7 years of bad times, right?
Mhm.
And then the 7 years of bad times hit. All of his family also comes down to Egypt, and then after a couple hundred years, their ethnic community goes back up to Palestine, and it then sows the roots of Israel, the foundation of the state of Israel, right? So is that story like a historical memory? You know, maybe it didn't exactly happen that way, but is that story of Joseph a memory of that time of like the 1177 and their return as an ethnic group? Is that sort of a historical memory of what we would call the Exodus? Eric Klein says that if the Exodus happened, he doesn't think it happened, but I mean, it's clear from his like body language when he says it. He says if it happened, it would have happened before then. It would have happened during the time of Ramses II, which happened before that collapse, right? But based on just looking at timelines and everything, I'm wondering if it actually happened quite a ways after that, right? After that collapse, and the reason why, for one, that they went down to Egypt and nobody even said anything, right? That doesn't really talk about that in the Bible. Like, I always thought it was weird. Like, Joseph gets sold into slavery, goes down to Egypt, and then his family all joins him, and nobody says anything. They're just kind of like, "Yep, you're also Egyptians. Everything's fine." You know what I mean? There's no question about like, why are you here? Checkpoint, border security. I mean, maybe things weren't like that back then, right? But same time, it kind of seems like, why would they go straight there? Why would they go straight to Egypt if they weren't part of the Egyptian Empire, which we know Egypt controlled Canaan at the time. So why would they go down to Egypt unless they had some connection with Egypt to begin with, right? And then why would they think to go back up to Canaan, if they didn't have some sort of connection in the first place? So, were the original Israelites actually Egyptians, is my question for Dan. You can edit that down into a more concise question.
That would be lovely. I don't know. It's pretty long-winded to figure out how to get that in a TikTok video, or something. Yeah, well, I have heard Dan McClellan say that the whole story of Moses is a complete fabrication, and that is several generations after Joseph and stuff like that. So I would assume that the Exodus story is a fabrication. The thing that makes me think that it's a fabrication is, if we're doing the math on how many people moved, it was like 1.2 million like people and all their animals and livestock or something. Like, I did the math anyway, because they said like this many people, but people meant men. They weren't counting women as people. So you basically double the number. And so when I did the math, and they basically said, oh, go out and tell the people that we're going to not have any leavened bread because we're going to leave really quickly. I'm like, you want to get this message out to about 1 million people overnight and tell them not to have leavened bread when some of them have already prepared that, and we have to move all these livestock and tents and all this other stuff? Like, that is a monumental task, even with like electricity and email and like electricity and stuff like that. How in the, like, I get it. Technology can do amazing things, and people pre-technology also did amazing things. I don't want to discount that. But the planning it would take in order to convey a message, like even if you were to get all of the elders together and like spread the word, would have
Mhm.
taken a super duper long time to get to that many people, and then to have everybody ready with something that just seems contrived. Like the whole idea of like the unleavened bread is this is what we're doing. I'm like, you had to get that message out quick, and by that time you could have leavened bread like this whole time. You know what I mean? That just seemed a little contrived to me, because like doing the math of how many people and animals, and it just seemed astronomical to me. But whatever,
Yeah,
it's possible,
I
I guess.
mean, yeah, there's that. I don't really think the Exodus per se happened, but I do wonder if maybe there was a time where some of the Egyptians who previously lived um, in Canaan went back up there because, things got a little easier, climate started changing, there stopped being so many earthquakes, there, all the factors that led to the collapse in 1177 um,
Mhm.
went away, no more invasions of the sea peoples, all that kind of stuff. And they were probably, I'm just making up a story here,
Mhm.
because I like narratives, I like to create stories. But I could just imagine like if their ancestors not too far back lived in this area and they were like, hey, we used to be in charge back there in that part of Canaan, but now we're kind of outsiders in Egypt, who, they kind of don't totally take us seriously. We're not, at the top of the social hierarchy. We're kind of like, you know, oppressed in one way or another. And they're like, let's just get out of here. And so they went back to Canaan where their ancestors, supposedly lived. I could
Well,
kind of see, yeah. Even if it wasn't
I
like overnight exodus, we go through the, Red Sea, all that stuff. I doubt that, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would be kind of curious to what he says. A different TikToker I used to follow, but then he blocked me for something I said. Ah, it's the account Museum of Tarot. Museum of Tarot. He never talks about tarot cards, but that's okay. He has his own personal museum dedicated to ancient writings and
Mhm.
spooky stuff that seems far out weird. Aliens, ancient civilizations, Egypt, all this other stuff. It's fascinating, and I never know how much I can trust because, it's TikTok, and everybody's got a shtick to do. Um, but one of his earlier videos that I found fascinating is he said he has this book that has the translation of what all of the hieroglyphics says on some monument or some ancient Egyptian something. And he said, this is all corroborated with the historic stuff that happened. Um, and I'm going to butcher any of the dates and names. But in one of his earlier videos, he said that the hieroglyphics basically said, you know, this prince who became pharaoh was fairly young when this natural disaster thing happened. This natural disaster thing was like something to do with giant earthquake and a giant thunder electrical storm, something coincided. And I don't know what it was, but like some electrical magnetic thunder column of whatever, just like doom. And it's been documented before in the past, so he says. So he had a name for it, but this thing would just spew out sulfur and death out of the ground, and it was this force of just like this wall of destruction,
Mhm.
earthquake, death. The air was acrid, you couldn't breathe, and something to do with the earthquake made the temple fall. Column hit the king prince on the head. There's a big gash. And so basically the country, the kingdom of Egypt, in some ways fell at that time because of this massive natural disaster thing that happened.
Tanis was destroyed by a cosmic weather event very similar to the Tunguska explosion, but on a much larger scale. These events happened approximately the Middle to Late Bronze Age and leveled cities across the Middle East and Northern Africa.
And so they were taking the royal family and all of their stuff that they could take and just trying to find a different place to live because this like environment of disaster was ongoing. The air couldn't be breathed. It was blotting out the sun. No plants could live. Something like to that effect. And in the process of them moving out and trying to find a place, like the whole country basically that was affected by this thing were raided by.
The place was looted by the Hapiru, who took off into the wilderness.
And it was just like these people who were a nothing clan ran off with all Egyptians' goods and left them alone and penniless or whatever, and they got off with all the good stuff. And he basically said, that's, and then they created their own story, and that was their exodus.
And Pharaoh took his army and gave chase, and they were eventually hit by a tidal wave. Pharaoh's own son was killed in the destruction of a temple that collapsed and crushed his skull. Now, these should sound familiar to you, because you've heard a version of these events told from the point of view of the looters. But I can assure you the story of the Egyptians, from their point of view, is much more solemn and thoughtful.
Because why would you want to live with honor and say, yeah, we screwed this community out of all their golden wealth, and let's create the story of an exodus where we were slaves and we overcame, and they all just wanted to give us their gold on our way out because of what our God had done.
What the reality is Egypt was destroyed, and during that calamity it was looted, and that loot was taken north, and that formed the funding for what later became the church, and that there is a definite agenda to try to keep that reality covered up. There is so much more to this story that completely changes the narrative.
Now, I thought that was really interesting and really compelling, and I wanted to do more research. And then I also looked at somebody else's TikTok video that says, this guy, this Museum of Tarot, he seems to be kind of anti-Semitic in what he says. So take it with a large heap of salt, sorry, because he seems anti-Semitic. And I'm like, hey, the story that he said does sound a little anti-Semitic. It paints the Jewish people in a bad light, but history is history, and you can paint America in bad light in a lot of ways. Like, we killed a bunch of Indians, or Native Americans. We purposefully, were the first bio warfare against humans. We did the Trail of Tears. It was sucky. We did some bad stuff. I'm not anti-American. That's just history. So, I wanted to follow it. I wanted to do some more research. Life is life. I never got to it. And one time he posted this video that the video just made him look like AI. It was really digital. His face was just very strange. And I was like, hey man, are you an AI avatar? You look strange. And then I was blocked from his account.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I can't do any more research on TikTok because I can't even see his content. He blocked me. So, yeah.
Yeah, AI avatars are weird. I don't even totally get what that is. It's like they take themselves and make themselves into an AI figure and make
That's what it looked like.
With an AI version of themselves.
Yeah. I mean, what it could have been is, how you have I don't know if you have an iPhone, but when you go into portrait mode, it has a false f-stop or a false aperture, so things are fuzzy in the background. It literally crops out, zoom right now crops out the background and shows you what it wants to show you, but sometimes it doesn't show you everything. like that.
Right.
And
Right.
so it could have been he was recording a video in portrait mode, and the focus was just so off and funky that the features of his face looked digitally overlaid with whatever weird funky focus it was, and it just made him look like an avatar. But because I couldn't tell, I commented, "Hey, you look fake. What's the deal? It's hard to trust people when they look fake." Blocked forever. So,
Nice. Nice.
hey, first time.
Classic internet moment right there.
Yeah. I was so eager to hear the truth and know the truth, and I was willing to hear far off ideas like this guy. He talks about aliens, he talks about these dicyanin goggles. Like if you look through a certain color on the color spectrum of indigo or purple, you can see the chi of people or the aura of certain things.
Hmm.
He says, and it can enhance your sense of what things are and where things are. And he sells them too, so I'm like, sure you do. Sure. But I was willing to hear him out until he blocked me, so I don't know. It was an interesting story, at least.
Yeah, it's how it be sometimes. I was following some page, and like he was making statements. Like generally I agreed with like the point he was making, you know, it was like some sort of politics or something like that. It was called the Grumpy Bat Cat, which if you're following something called the Grumpy Bat Cat, you know, it's probably not that serious, right? But like
Uh-huh.
after Trump got elected, he was very upset and was posting stuff. And like one of the things he posted was like, much as I was like not a Trump fan at all, like I mean, I work in refugee resettlement. It's like my career was directly impacted by Donald Trump.
Politics. Yeah.
So I was not excited about him being president, you know. But like this page was posting all this like really kind of overwrought stuff where I was like, is that true? And I was like, I questioned like one minor detail of like one of the things that he posted. Blocked. You know? And I was like, man, this country's going crazy. Like people are really acting the fool right now. This is whack. This is not cool. It's like I don't even disagree with you. I just didn't was questioning something you said that didn't seem true.
Yeah,
But
that makes me even wonder even more. Like, the person I thought was maybe an AI avatar. Like, if it happened to be the truth, he didn't want that getting out, and he wanted me to never question it again in public. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, maybe he couldn't validate the point that you had, and so he didn't want that out there and block you. And then it's a siphoning thing. It's a filtering. It's a silo thing. I want my group of people that support me that don't want to know the truth to support me, and I get that.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy times out there. Like speaking of Dan McClellan, I don't even know how he does it. Like he says he's a professional internet arguer. Like I don't know how you would take that on
He
as a
says that?
job. Yeah,
Wow.
he described himself that way the other day in a video I saw. And I was like, dude, professional internet arguer. Like, good on you, you know, for like pursuing the truth and like debating people on the internet. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Like,
Right.
you know, talking like this is fine, where it's like we agree,
It's low
disagree, we're
key.
just talking
Yeah.
about stuff, whatever, you know. But like if you're not even reading from the same playbook and like arguing about just like basic stuff, like oh my gosh. I don't know how people do it. I don't know
Yeah.
how people do it.
Well,
Yeah.
we're low key, man, and I said earlier we have the caucacity to do this anyway, which is the Caucasian audacity.
I know. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I think the question of trans people in sports is a super interesting question, but like, um, I don't feel like I don't feel like I know enough about the topic to even have an intelligent thing to say about it, other than just
Well,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
like Yeah.
It's good to admit that.
I feel like it should be more of a discussion, but without like the, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about how like the people who yell the loudest often have the biggest, let's say the most
Followers.
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people who yell the loudest and have the most intense things to say. Yeah, like you said, they have the most followers, or they get the most audience or whatever. Yeah, Josh Johnson. Do you follow Josh Johnson at all?
No.
Yeah, he's a comedian. He's gotten really big lately. Like he's gotten really big on TikTok and Facebook and stuff. And YouTube. Like he just posts videos of his stand up. But he was talking about how he has friends, white friends, you know, that he are on the same side of the political fence as him, but he looks at them and he's like, you know, you're a little bit much, aren't you? Like, he's like, we'd maybe be at the same rallies.
We would still be at the same rally. But they just stomping harder, like that's gonna do something. I'm like,
he said he was talking to this friend, you know, he's black, his friend is white, and his friend was saying like they were getting into an argument at a restaurant about the definition of racism, and his white friend was saying that like
black people can't be racist because racism is prejudice plus power, right? And I was like, that's don't do that.
And since black people, you know, don't have as much power, they can be prejudiced, but they can't be racist. And he was like taking issue with that. He was like, you know, I don't know, man. Like, I don't really agree with that. And he was like, I think black people can be racist. So he was like yelling in this restaurant in public about examples of him being racist, which I mean, it's definitely worth looking at.
So then I was giving an example of me being racist. Okay. I'm not saying this is right. It's just how I am. And I'm trying to change. Remember that. But I look at my white friend, okay. I feel, when I see my white friends struggle in the sun, I don't really care. Like, that is racist though, because it's an entire group where I'm like, then do better. Like, it's like, that's not right. That's not right. You know what I mean? But I look at white people struggling in the sun the way I imagine, not calling anybody out, but it's the way I imagine they look at black people when we like can't get along, right? It's like, it's not really my problem, is it? Do better, I guess.
It was really funny, but it made me think of like people who say the wildest things often like talk the loudest and get the most people to listen to them. You know what I mean? And people who are like a little bit more, I don't know, moderate, even moderate isn't even the right word. They're just like, you know, not wacky. Don't talk as loud. You know, they don't talk as loud. They don't
Right.
have as much to say, you know? So like, you know, he's kind of like, you know, Josh Johnson is saying, yeah, black people can be racist. Anybody can be racist. I mean, I was sitting there like, that's what I think, you know, like, yeah, anybody can be racist. Like, yeah, sure, it's more of a problem when white people are racist because we, you know, like most of Congress and usually the president, but usually the president, you know what I mean? You can't say that like,
Right.
you can't say that like, you know, the only white people can be racist because like if you go to Japan, like in Japan, people in Japan who are Japanese have all the power, and like they could be racist too, you know. Or you go to India, everybody in India.
I hear
Indian.
I hear South Africa is now that they've given some power to the black people, like they're trying to take it and do the same kind of crap that the white people were doing against them. Now, admittedly, this is from white people telling me this, but they seem to have the sense of oppression from the black people who are gaining more power of like, man, they seem to be pretty racist against white people.
But when you say power, do you mean power of the individual or power of the group? Right? Because individually, there are very powerful black people that could exert their power over other people, right? But if you're talking about power of the group, then yeah, maybe we'll never get there. I'm just saying, like, power of the group, I don't see an all-black Senate happening anytime soon. Yeah.
Even just the idea that, like, black people don't have power, which is an objectively untrue statement. Like, that's nuts. Like, P. Diddy, like, he had too much power. Like, get the power out of that guy's hands as quick as you can. Way too much, right? Like, a lot of power. Obama, 8 years, the most powerful man in the world.
Yeah.
Black people have a lot of power. So, and what they say and do actually really does matter. And like pretending like it doesn't just because there's a suppressed minority, just like just puts a wedge between everybody, right?
Yeah. Just like that guy that came in and was like, you thought you look down on me because I'm black. I'm like, no, I thought you were kind of a jerk because you interrupted our class and you look like you were some fancy guy and you could do it because you're fancy. Yeah.
I mean, I am a conspiracy theorist. You want to hear my conspiracy theory right now?
I guess so. Sure.
Okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, this isn't like I don't have any knowledge. My conspiracy is that, corporations put on these DEI trainings, and in their best interest is to make sure that white people, black people, Asian people, we don't cooperate to like work for like better working conditions or better livelihoods or better unemployment benefits or whatever. They don't want us all collaborating. They want us to be as separated and like looking at each other like as possible. So like putting on these kind of like wacky DEI trainings that will actually separate us into different groups. It has that effect. So like regardless of what you call it, and they're the ones who are funding these things. And I think something that would actually bring people together would not be in the interest of a company that wants to avoid collective bargaining, for instance. They want to avoid that sort of thing. Yeah, they don't want people together. They don't want people like kumbaya and being nice to each other. They want people separate and like fighting over stupid stuff. So that's my conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't have to put that in there.
All right. Well, we've ran a pretty cool gambit of different topics, and I like it. I always like these kind of conversations, sir.
Me too.
So
Yeah,
I still
me
don't
too.
have 1,000 followers on either YouTube or TikTok. So if anybody's still watching, just remember, subscribing would be nice for me. I don't know what that would do other than make me feel better. But there you go. I've said it.
Subscribing is good.
A pity subscribe is still subscribe.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, I'm gonna go back to my family now. You take care. So thanks for meeting with me again.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk next month, I bet.
Yeah, I like that idea. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.